let's talk about some wide receivers here. Wide receiver 25 to 40. Who are, and this is a question I saw on Twitter, who are the two guys in that wide receiver 25 to 40 range that you think are safe bets to outkick their ADP? I'll let you start this one off.
Dude, I'm so excited. I haven't talked about Marvin Jones in a while. And right here before drafts, I really hope no one from our league is listening because I'm looking to get Marvin Jones as my wide receiver 3 or 4. If people in our home league are listening, I'm probably going to get sniped and I'm not going to get him. So the Marvin Jones hype, it hasn't stopped. Just because we haven't talked about him in a couple episodes doesn't mean he's going to fade into oblivion. But right now he's being drafted as wide receiver 37. So it sure feels like
so
people
nice.
are disrespecting Marvin Jones. And he has a long track record of being a very productive fantasy football wide receiver. And when you look at Marvin Jones, it's going to come in boom bust form, but his value is so worth it for your flex spot if you go running backs early or something like that. And his bust games, I say boom or bust, but his bust games aren't normally killing you. He's usually putting up 9 to 12 PPR points in down weeks, which isn't what you're looking for, but that's not going to totally ruin your week, like Will Fuller level 1 point and leaving the game. So just looking at last season, he had 9 or more fantasy points in 10 out of 13 games, which isn't, a great benchmark. You're not looking for 9 fantasy points, but it's just showing you his floor is higher than people are giving him credit for as like a true boom bust guy, because we all know he can take the top off. And then, in 13 games last season, he was wide receiver 16 before he got shut down. 5 of those games were also played without Matt Stafford. So with Marvin Jones, I think we saw his upside last season. He was on the cusp of a wide receiver 1. He was a high-end wide receiver 2. A lot of those games were without Stafford. There's no reason for me to believe that Jones can't creep up and be a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1 this season. Steph, I know you love Marvin Jones. I don't even know if it's worth asking. Like, I know you're in on him, but like, as wide receiver 37, are you comfortable with him as your flex going into the season?
Oh yeah, 100%. He's in that, field stretcher profile type of guy. He's in a contract year this season, and he was on the field for 94% of snaps. That was among the highest in the NFL, and he was efficient with those opportunities. Like you said, he was breathing down Kenny Galladay's neck in terms of touchdowns on the season. I want to say he had, you can spot check me on this. I want to say it was 7 or 8 to Galladay's 11, which was really nice to see from him. So yeah, absolutely. When you're in that, dart throw range, deep wide receiver names, these are flex guys that have boom upside. You think of like a Hollywood Brown this year, or you look even farther like a Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson. I like Marvin Jones as the safest option of those guys because he's the veteran name that's there.
Yeah, Steph, Marvin Jones, 9 touchdowns last season in 13 games. Kenny G at 11 in 16 games. So it's much more of a 1A, 1B than people want to admit. And people always use Marvin Jones like 3-4 touchdown games against him. They're like, oh, well, like half of that production came in one game. It's like, yeah, but he's still giving you solid weeks on a week-in, week-out basis, and then he gives you the upside that you're looking for that you're not going to get out of anybody else in that range. So I love the pick, and it's not just last season either. Back in 2018, he was the wide receiver 27 before getting shut down for the season. He only played 9 games that year, but wide receiver 27, getting drafted as wide receiver 37 right now, that's still incredible value. And then in 2017, he was a wide receiver 1. In 2017, he finished the year as the wide receiver 12. So this is 3 years in a row now that he's giving you wide receiver 1 production, wide receiver 2 production, and high-end wide receiver 3 production. And right now he's being drafted as a wide receiver 4. So to me, that just doesn't make sense at all. And when healthy, he is a top 30 player at the position. And again, it's much more of a 1A, 1B situation than people want to realize. In the 8 games with Stafford last season, Galladay and Marvin Jones were separated by 0.9 fantasy points per game. In the 8 games with Stafford, they were wide receiver 11 and wide receiver 14. Yet somehow Kenny Galladay is being drafted 6 rounds in front of Marvin Jones right now. It's absolutely criminal. So give me all the Marvin Jones in the 7th, 8th round as the wide receiver 37, and I will happily slide him into my flex spot to give me an upside guy who still has a pretty stable floor.
Yeah, for 37, that's the question is who is a safe bet to outkick their ADP. Marvin Jones is definitely one of those. He's like the most reliable wide receiver 3 you can get your hands on.